Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. In Pakistan, diplomatic sources have revealed that India's intelligence agency RAW and Afghanistan's NDS are behind the attack that killed 3 people and injured 22 in Lahore last weekend blast. They said that the incident once again exposes India's evil designs to destabilize Pakistan by fueling terrorism. Meanwhile, the sources also said Sunday's attack on an airbase in occupied Jammu ahead of the SCO conference raises questions. They attributed the latest hype to the failure of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's conference with the Kashmiri politicians. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged India to end the use of pellets against children in occupied Kashmir. He made these observations in a report on children and armed conflict presented in the UN Security Council on Monday. The report noted that 9 children were killed and 30 were maimed in the occupied territory last year. Israel's new foreign minister Yair Lapid has inaugurated the country's first embassy in the United Arab Emirates. It is the first visit of an Israeli cabinet minister to the Gulf states since the two countries established ties last year. In Ethiopia, Tigray rebels vowed to drive out what they called enemy from the region, suggesting fighting will continue despite a declaration of a ceasefire by the government. The rebels took control of the regional capital, Mekelle, on Monday after government forces retreated following 8 months of fighting. The conflict has already left thousands of people dead and nearly 5 million are now in urgent need of food aid. India has reported 907 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 37,000 cases overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 23 more people have died and over 700 tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.9 million lives and has infected over 181 million people. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. In Pakistan, diplomatic sources have revealed the involvement of hostile nexus of intelligence agencies in a terrorist attack in Lahore. Last Wednesday, 3 people were killed and 22 injured when an explosives-laden vehicle exploded in the Johar town neighborhood.
The sources said India's primary intelligence agency, RAW, and Afghanistan's NDS are behind the attack. They said the incident once again reveals India's evil designs to destabilize Pakistan by fueling terrorism. The sources said the nexus has been engaged in disrupting peace and stability in the country.
We start working on the vulnerabilities of Pakistan. It can be economic, it can be internal security, it can be political, it can be their isolation internationally, it can be this thing like that, of exposing their terrorist activities, or it can be anything. It can be defeating their policies in Afghanistan, making it difficult for them to manage internal political balance or internal security. I'm not going into those details.
Pakistan's intelligence agencies have frequently provided proof of the nexus flaring up terrorism, particularly in tribal areas and Balochistan. They questioned if the international institutions will hold India accountable or will continue to blame Pakistan for the menace.
Indian embassies and consulates operating along Pakistan's borders have become hubs of terrorist sponsorship against Pakistan. Indian diplomats in Afghanistan, they have been regularly supervising various terrorist activities. Indian intelligence agencies are managing 87 such terrorist camps. The details are right now, they can be seen on the screen. Out of these terrorist camps, 66 are located in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, the sources also said Sunday's attack on an airbase in occupied Jammu ahead of the SCO conference raises questions. They attributed the latest hype to the failure of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's conference with the Kashmiri parties. The sources also said there has been a strong conflict going on within India's institutions. They said Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat and India's Air Chief have been at odds over authority. The sources said the drone attack could also be the result of that friction. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi expressed concern over the support of anti-state agencies behind the blast. In a statement, he said the anti-terror financing investigating agencies should conduct a thorough inquiry into resources for such operations.
For more on this, we have with us Lieutenant General named Khalid Lodhi, retired. Now, welcome to the News Bulletin. Now, General Lodhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has failed nationally and support for him has been declining. Do you think these tactics will help him make any gains?
That is possible because initially also he came on the tide of Pakistan hatred, and there are enough extremist elements in India to support him. But with the passage of time, as his tactic has not really succeeded, maybe he loses some support. But I think he's still trying the same tactics, that Pakistan hatred card, he's using it again. So let us see what happens. I don't think that many extremists will leave him for that. He might just continuing getting the support, at least from the extremist section of that society.
Lieutenant General Lodhi, now given the Afghan peace talks, the region can finally hope for some stability. Don't you think India is trying to spoil such efforts by this nefarious nexus with NDS for terror campaigns?
That is very much true, and as Pakistan has very good two principles: one, that we have no favorites, and secondly, that all solutions should be Afghan led and Afghan owned. But then the caveat is that the Afghans should be allowed to do these things themselves. But if other powers like India, they try to interfere or they try to support one side, then there will be a lot of problem. And this is the thing which must be exposed to the entire world. And I think we must draw the attention of the world that if we really want to remain neutral, if they want Pakistan to remain neutral, they have to goad other powers also to remain neutral as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Because if others, they start interfering, then perforce there will be a problem in Afghanistan. So I agree with you that they are trying to destroy the talks which can take place. They don't want peace in Afghanistan, and that all goes against what the world is wanting. So we must try to expose them whatever they are doing. You're right.
That was Lieutenant General Lodhi. Thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. We also have Mr. Zamir Akram, former ambassador. Welcome. Now, Mr. Ambassador, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has failed nationally and support for him has been declining. Do you think that these tactics will help him make any gains?
Well, we have to try harder to do that. As far as the international agencies are concerned, like the United Nations Terrorism Committee, unfortunately, that committee only has recognized some terrorist organizations, mainly related to Al-Qaeda, but they have not recognized some of the agencies that the Indians are sponsoring, like RAW and even the Afghan NDS. So we have to continue trying to have those agencies put on that list of terrorist sponsors. Then we need to make an even greater effort to raise this issue at the bilateral level with the major players, major countries like the U.S., China, and of course, because China also has a concern about India's terrorist sponsorship activities from Afghanistan and elsewhere. So we need to work with the major players in order to project the Indian role in promoting terrorism in Pakistan. Part of this is aimed at Pakistan per se, but it is also aimed this terrorism against CPEC. The incidents that have taken place in Balochistan and Karachi against the Chinese consulate, point in that direction. So we need to have a major international effort, both bilaterally and through the multinational organizations.
Now, Mr. Akram, given the Afghan peace talks, the region can finally hope for some stability. Don't you think India is trying to spoil such efforts by this nefarious nexus with NDS for terror campaigns?
I don't believe that Mr. Modi has any interest in regional peace. He would like to use whatever opportunity he can to promote his political fortunes. He, if you remember, in 2019, even risked going to war with Pakistan for that purpose in order to win his election. So we should not expect him at all to talk about or to try and contribute towards regional peace and security, especially when it comes to Pakistan.
Former Ambassador Zamir Akram, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged India to end the use of pellets against children in occupied Kashmir. He made these observations in a report on children and armed conflict presented in the UN Security Council on Monday. The report noted that 9 children were killed and 30 were maimed in the occupied territory last year. Guterres said that he is alarmed at the detention of children and the military use of schools. Meanwhile, Indian forces have martyred 2 Kashmiri youths in the last 48 hours. 368 Kashmiris have been martyred since New Delhi revoked the occupied valley's special status in August 2019. Meanwhile, Mushal Hussain Malik, the wife of detained Kashmiri leader Yasin Malik, has voiced fears that Malik could be tortured to death. She demanded the UN bodies and human rights organizations take notice of his health condition and ill treatment by Indian authorities. In Afghanistan, the Taliban claim to have captured the Khirz district of Kandahar province. Group spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said the fighters also killed and captured many Afghan soldiers.
The group said it has captured 2 army checkpoints in Maidan Warda Sharki area, killing 2 soldiers. In a tweet, Mujahid said the fighters also detained 3 soldiers and seized several weapons and ammunition. Local media quoted Defense Ministry as saying that 22 Taliban were killed in an airstrike in Baghlan province. Meanwhile, Kabul said it has freed 10 villages of Balkh's Sharkhin district from the Taliban, killing 55 fighters during the operations. Earlier, Iran said it is monitoring the situation in Afghanistan, offering to facilitate the intra-Afghan talks. At a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh stressed the need for an inclusive government in Kabul. He said the Taliban are a part of Afghanistan but won't be the whole present and future of government.
Israel's new foreign minister Yair Lapid has inaugurated the country's first embassy in the United Arab Emirates. It is the first visit of an Israeli cabinet minister to the Gulf power since the 2 countries established ties last year. Lapid is also due to inaugurate a consulate in Dubai and sign a bilateral agreement on economic cooperation. He is also set to visit the site of Expo 2020 Dubai, a World Fair opening in October where Israel has built a pavilion. The United States says its troops stationed in Syria have been attacked by multiple rockets but escaped injuries. In a tweet, military spokesperson Colonel Wayne Morodo said U.S. forces responded by firing back at the positions in self-defense.
He said the damage after rocket strikes is being assessed, but did not provide details on the nature of the target. However, Syrian state media said a United States military base in the Al Omar oil field in the eastern countryside of Deir ez-Zor city is targeted. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but earlier Iran-backed armed groups vowed to retaliate to U.S. air raids in Iraq and Syria, which drew widespread condemnation. Baghdad said it would study all legal options to prevent such actions from being repeated. Syria called the strikes a flagrant violation of the sanctity of Syrian and Iraqi lands. Iran said Washington is moving on the wrong path and urged it to stop interference in the region. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the White House defended the strikes as a way to tamp down on the risk of conflict. The strike killed 4 Iran-backed militia members in Iraq.
In Ethiopia, Tigray rebels vowed to drive out what they called enemy from the region, suggesting that fighting will continue despite a declaration of ceasefire by the government. The rebels took control of the regional capital, Mekelle, on Monday after government forces retreated following 8 months of fighting. The conflict in the restive region began last year when the government launched an offensive to oust the then ruling party, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The fighting has left thousands of people dead and nearly 5 million are now in urgent need of food aid. UN's envoy says Libya's parties have not made any tangible progress during the talks. He said the House of Representatives must form a constitutional basis and enact necessary legislation by the 1st of July. The 4-day in-person meeting of the representatives of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum is underway in Switzerland. In the opening remarks, UN envoy Jan Kubis said the 1st July deadline is fast approaching. He called on the all Libyan parties to overcome differences and trust any deficit to focus on the reaching of consensus. The UN-backed talks seek to build a constitutional basis for Libyan presidential and parliamentary elections scheduled in December. China has called for Tokyo to issue a clarification after Japan's deputy defense minister called Taiwan a country. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin termed the remarks as erroneous and a serious violation of political relations. In a statement, Wang urged Tokyo to exercise caution and to not damage China's sovereignty in any way. He said Japan must refrain from sending wrong signal to the Taiwan independence forces. Beijing also warned Tokyo against making such remarks in the future. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has warned Russia against what it called Moscow's attacks and interference. In an interview, Blinken said Washington hopes for more stable and profitable relations with Moscow. But he said that the United States will respond to Russia's act as a solar wind attacks and intrusions into elections. Talk about China, Blinken said relations with Beijing are most complicated. He added that the United States respect the ties of other countries with China. But the secretary said Washington will not ask any country to choose between China and the U.S. India has reported 907 deaths from the COVID-19 and more than 37,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.9 million lives and has infected over 181 million people. More in this report.
The Delta variant of the coronavirus is fueling the latest wave of the pandemic as the world creeps towards seeing 4 million COVID-19 deaths. The variant continues to cause a headache for major supporting events and forcing countries to revise their travel advisories. As Russia's St. Petersburg prepares to host a Euro 2020 quarterfinal, it keeps posting record COVID-19 deaths. Turkey has halted all direct travel from Bangladesh, Brazil, South Africa, India, Nepal and Sri Lanka due to new variants. In Australia, Brisbane is set to become the 4th major city in lockdown due to concerns about the rapid spread of the Delta variant.
The Delta variant is proving to be a far more difficult element of this virus than we have seen to date. This is not just the case in Australia. It was certainly my experience when I was overseas that the Delta variant is presenting very different challenges from those that we have faced in the past.
Bangladesh is set to enforce a sweeping national lockdown with public transport networks closing and soldiers ready to patrol the streets. In Brazil, an opposition senator filed a criminal complaint against President Jair Bolsonaro over alleged irregularities in vaccine purchases. Meanwhile, the U.S. has raised its COVID-19-related travel advisory for the UAE to level 4. A new study has found that giving a Pfizer jab after administering the first shot of AstraZeneca will produce better immune responses.
We know that the standard schedules with AstraZeneca and Pfizer do protect against disease, so I think that should be the default option. We have enormous safety databases on those schedules, and we know they protect against disease. But we have shown that the mixed schedules do generate a good immune response. So if there were circumstances that meant that you needed to change things around or you needed flexibility, then I think our data are very reassuring that that would be okay.
Johnson & Johnson will not be undertaking local trials for its single-shot COVID-19 vaccine in India Meanwhile, Israel will destroy 800,000 coronavirus vaccines that are nearing their expiration date if no country agrees to purchase them.
Pakistan has reported 23 deaths from COVID-19 and 735 cases over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says that the nationwide fatalities have reached 22,254. The virus has infected over 956,000 people in the country so far, while nearly 902,000 have recovered. The ministry said there are over 32,000 active cases and 2,000 of them are critical. According to the NCOC, the country's positivity rate stayed at 1.78%. Pakistan has administered around 14.8 million doses of vaccines to date. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pakistan and Japan have vowed to strengthen their security cooperation for promoting international peace. The pledge was made during the 8th round of Pakistan-Japan security dialogue. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the forum discussed a regional security situation and other global issues. At the occasion, Additional Secretary Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry highlighted Pakistan's efforts in the fight against terrorism. He also stressed the importance of peaceful resolution of outstanding disputes for durable peace and stability in South Asia. In India, at least 10 people have died after a wedding party vehicle fell into a valley in northern Himachal Pradesh. Officials say 2 other persons sustained critical injuries in the accident in Sumar district. The cause of the accident is yet to be ascertained. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed grief over the accident and announced compensation for the victims. In 2017, nearly 148,000 people killed in road accidents in the country. The United Nations says its peacekeeping missions globally are preparing for a possible shutdown. The closure will take effect if the General Assembly fails to agree to a new $6 billion budget for the year, the 30th of June. Talking to media, UN's Management Strategy head Catherine Pollard said the world body is running 12 peacekeeping missions. Pollard said they have been advised to start putting contingency plans in place. She added that the UN chief can only spend money to safeguard UN assets, staff, and the peacekeepers if the budget is not approved. However, the official hoped the member states will conclude their negotiations. The United States is the largest contributor to the peacekeeping budget, accounting for 28%, followed by China at 15%. In South Africa, former President Jacob Zuma has been sentenced to 15 months in jail by the country's highest court. He is guilty of contempt of not appearing before the court in his corruption trial while he was president. Zuma said that he was a victim of a giant political conspiracy. His time in power ended in 2018. In the U.S. state of Florida, the death toll from a building collapse in Miami has risen to 11, while 150 people are still missing. Officials say 130 people have been accounted for so far. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava said rescue teams pulled 2 more bodies from the rubble. Addressing the media, Levine Cava vowed to keep searching for any possible survivors. However, hopes are fading as no one has been pulled alive from the debris since Thursday. The cause of the collapse remains under investigation. Meanwhile, over 100 people gathered for a vigil in Surfside to tribute to the victims of the building collapse. European stocks have advanced as global investors awaited key economic data out of the United States. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the gains, jumping nearly 1%. The CAC 40 in Paris has also edged close to 0.5%. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB both advanced marginally. The Pan-European Stock 600 also gained fractionally. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.